It's my pleasure to introduce tonight a couple of speakers from the EMRC, the Eastern Metropolitan Regional Council. They're going to be talking to us about embracing a circular economy. We have Wendy Harris, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer for EMRC. Wendy has worked across all three tiers of government, the not-for-profit and the private sector, and her skills include driving sustainability and environmental outcomes and promoting the principles of the circular economy and net zero. She's an effective leader and manager of people, experienced in driving change and delivering strategic and business planning and economic development outcomes. She has an Executive Masters of Business Administration, Advanced Diploma of Business Management, Diploma of Local Government, and a Cert 4 in Financial Services. We also are very happy to have Marcus Geisler with us tonight, the CEO of EMRC. Marcus is over the past 30 years, Marcus has built up experience in developing strategies, delivering projects, and leading teams in the private and public sector, primarily in waste management and resource recovery. In the private sector, he was engaged in senior strategic and operational roles for companies including Suez, Thiess, and Coates Hire in Europe, Australia, and Asia. From 2008 to 2019, Marcus served on the Western Australian State Government Waste Authority Board from 2012 as the board's chairman, which culminated in the development and launch of the across-government WARR strategy 2030 in 2019. Introducing the circular economy and behavioural change as guiding concepts. Marcus joined the EMRC in the same year to focus on implementation of the WARR strategy, enabling the linear to circular transition through local government. And Marcus has qualifications in economics and trade, is an alumni and fellow of the Australian Institute of Company Directors, and is involved in not-for-profit organisations and government advisory boards. Please join me in welcoming both of them for their talk this evening. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the introduction. That's fantastic. And I'm only 35 years old. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. And actually, it's familiar territory because I do a bit of guest lecturing here at Curtin, so for Atik Zaman. And it's fantastic to talk about what's happening with waste management and decarbonisation and the circular economy. But more so, what do we need to do to take it further? Because there's not happening enough, and I'm sure you agree with me on that. So I'll just take you through a presentation, and I'll talk a little bit about what's happening at a national level, at a federal level, what's happening at a local level in Western Australia, what's happening on circular economy, and the behaviour change, and then we'll talk a little bit about the EMRC and what we're doing to kick the can a bit further. So what's happening at a federal level, and I can't believe it, I've been here, and I come from the Netherlands originally, and we were talking about all of this about 25 years ago, and I migrated about 23 years ago, and I couldn't believe how standoffish the federal government was in the last 20 years. But they've seen the light now, and actually in the last 2 years they've just been pumping out policies and acts and legislation and initiatives. So they're coming to the party because I think the time is over that they could say we are a federation and it's not our responsibility, it's a responsibility of the states. I think the light has gone on and the federal government now sees they have a role to play. So they came up with the federal government came out with the Recycling and Waste Reduction Act in 2020 and a National Waste Policy Plan, Action Plan, and there's 8 or 7 headline strategies. The first important one is 80% resource recovery, so material recovery, which leads to the circular economy. And then another important KPI or target is the halving the amount of organic waste sent to landfill by 2030. So fantastic objectives. They also came out, federal government, with a sustainable procurement guide, which that's where it starts with, because if you buy the wrong stuff, that cannot be recycled. And if you're not willing to have recycled content in the products you buy, then we have no hope. So they came up with a guideline on that. And then obviously in January this year, the Circular Economy Roadmap for plastics and glass, paper and tyres, because there's going to be a ban on these products in the next couple of years, an export ban on these. And then I was very happy with this, with the draft National Soil Strategy, because finally there's a realization that we are just putting synthetic fertilizer, or maybe I'm talking to the wrong people here, because you like to make synthetic fertilizer, you're a chemist. But it's, the problem is it's in sandy soils, and there's a home for synthetic fertilizer. But if you put them in sandy soil, especially on Bassendean sands, you lose 90% because you go straight to the soil and it's not taken up by the plant, so it's a waste. So we have to bring back structural material and nutrients, natural products, back into the soil. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. And then in April, I think it was this year, the National Plastics Plan. What are we going to do with plastics? There's a modern manufacturing strategy being implemented, and a highlight, you can't read it, but this is actually the ministers for the environment of all the states and territories agreed that we should harmonize. We should harmonize things. We should harmonize the collection systems in Australia. We shouldn't have different bin collars, different lid collars. So that will make the education of the community and the engagement of the community easier. So there's at a high level, at federal level and at state level now, agreement on the way forward. So harmonization is fantastic. But a big focus is organics, and I won't dwell on this, but we're going to move towards, and this is part of the statewide strategy, is actually the headline strategy. Every household in Perth and Peel by 2025 will have a 3-bin system. And why is that? Is that we want to separate at the source. We want to keep the materials clean and then take into processing plants. You cannot unscramble the egg. If you put it in one bin, the glass and the organics and the paper and the cardboard, put it all together in one bin, you cannot separate it with to put it through processing facilities. And you want to involve the community. So you want to put infrastructure at the household. So I don't know whether so about 12 local governments in Perth and Peel now have a FOGO collection system, food and garden organics, and that's actually the system that's going to be implemented. If you have a 2-bin system, you can expect, that's the top line, you can expect about a diversion rate of landfill or recovery rate of about 33% for the yellow rate bin. If you introduce a 3-bin, which is the bottom line, a FOGO system, food and garden organics separate, you can expect almost a diversion rate or recovery rate of 70%. It's fantastic. Let me just go there. And this is why we're doing this. Organics in landfill is very bad, and the efficiency of landfills to capture methane gas. Obviously, I should go back. Organics decompose under anaerobic conditions. If the cap is not in a landfill, the methane gas will actually go, obviously, in the atmosphere, and it's a very potent greenhouse gas. Greenhouse gas is very topical now. We want to go net zero, or we have to tackle that. The best way to tackle it is not to put a cap on the landfill and try to capture it. Just remove them from the bin and compost it aerobically in controlled conditions. So then methane gas is not formed. So this is the trend of methane generation. I'll just talk a little bit about the waste generation and recovery targets in Australia. In 1996, we generated 22.7 million tonnes. This is Australia-wide. Recycled a little bit, 7%. 21 million tonnes went to landfill. In 2019, we still put about 21 million tonnes to landfill, but the generation actually went up by 250%. So we're recycling more. The recycling in 2019 was actually 56%. Now, with these new policies and targets and legislation at a federal level and a state level, we set ourselves a target of 80% material recovery, but also less material into landfill. So we're going to cap the amount that can go into landfill. So we can only landfill, if we achieve the targets and the strategies, 14 million tonnes. But that means that we have to recycle 56 million tonnes by 2030. So that means we have to grow the industry capacity, we have to grow the markets for recycled products in the next 9 years by 24 million tonnes. We're currently at 32 million tonnes. So we have to get better at actually reusing and repurposing material, otherwise we will never achieve these targets. Yep. So it's always good to look at numbers. I'm from industry, work for a local government now, but still have this industry view. And if you don't set yourself targets, we have no hope of achieving anything. Now, there's a lot of discussion about offshore and onshore processing. Total waste recovered is about 32 million tonnes, and export is only 4 million tonnes, 4.5 million tonnes. The rest is actually already processed onshore, which is the column on the right. What went overseas is glass, a little bit, textiles, tires, plastics, paper and cardboard, but the top blue line, metals. 2.5 million tonnes of metals is exported. So, but for recycling, it all went to China or Japan, and it's actually reused, and new steel is made out of it, and new non-ferrous are used. And you see the impact on the China sword, so the banning of import of our waste from Australia into China and Indonesia and Thailand and Vietnam has a big impact on the paper cardboard. Paper cardboard, you see the drop, the China sword came in about here, and by 2024 we will not be able to export any paper of cardboard. It has to be, there will be a ban on export, it has to be processed here. Another impact is the plastics. But I'm not too fussed about this drop. What is the real issue is that we are only recovering about 400,000 tons of plastics, whilst in the roadmap, in this document of CSIRO, the consumption of plastics is 3.4 million tons. So we're only capturing in a recovery about 10%. We should focus on the 90% and finding markets for that and reusing that here. Talk a little bit about the bans already. So from January this year, glass cannot be exported anymore. From July this year, mixed plastics, mixed polymers can't be exported. From December on, whole-use tires can't be exported anymore. From July next year, single-resin polymer plastics can't be exported anymore. So it has to be reprocessed, reflaked, repalletized, and used here in manufacturing processes from July next year. This is only 7 months away. And from July 24, no more mixed and unsorted paper and cardboard can be processed. So what the federal government said, we need to help industry. We have to put some funding out there. And this is part of the Recycling Modernisation Fund. And they matched it dollar for dollar with the West Australian government. And actually grants has been given out to put infrastructure in place in Western Australia. And $16 million has been given to 3 companies in Western Australia, 9 for plastics processing, $19 million for tire processing to about 4 companies, and 1 company got $30 million, and they're going to build a $85 million pulping plant, which we used to have. Amcor used to have one in Phoenix Road in Fremantle, and but they're going to Suez is going to build a new one, so $30 million. So the federal government and the state government have committed $75 million in infrastructure, which is a fantastic assistance and kick. Now, I'll talk a little bit about the West Australian scene, and I'm very close to this because I was the chairman, and I actually led the consultation on this, on our new strategy. And the most important thing that we did is that we actually linked an action plan. Never be in government and just put out a strategy, because a strategy is just a bundle of words. Put an action plan in place and put a commitment in there that's going to be reviewed on a regular basis. So we put 50 actions in there, and we actually made it a cross-government strategy. So every department is involved. The Department of Treasury, the Department of Finance, the Department of Local Government, Education, and so forth. So Department of Environment. So that's fantastic. Department of Transport, very important market for recycled content. We also changed the vision for Western Australia, and we included circular economy. Circular economy as a new focus concept. We focus on 3 key areas, which is avoidance of waste in the first place, and we actually put targets, 2% per annum avoidance, but we got population growth. So we're still making more waste than last year because the population is growing faster than the 2%. We put targets in for recovery of waste, and we focused on material recovery. This is very different from Europe. In Europe, it's accepted that if you burn waste, and energy recovery is really leakage out of the circular economy, if you look at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation model. So we have to focus on the recovery of materials first. Residual waste can be burned, and it can be turned into power, energy. And the other one is protect the other areas. So we have to protect human health and the environment. And this is an interesting one, is that no more than 15% of waste in Perth and Peel can be landfilled. We actually run the biggest landfill in Perth and Peel. It's the Red Hill landfill up on 2J Road. And we take about 1/3 of all the waste generated in Perth. So we have to reinvent ourselves as an organization, because landfill is a dying art. So we have to come up with a new plan. We had 3 guiding concepts when we developed the strategy, and the first one is the waste hierarchy. Avoidance is the most preferred, and landfilling is the least preferred. Material recovery is the focus, and energy recovery is just a little bit above disposal. And I don't mind energy recovery of residual waste, because at least we're dealing with the waste now, and we don't put it in a hole in the ground and let our kids deal with it. The second guiding concept we introduced was moving away from this linear concept to a circular economy. We'll talk about that a bit more. And this one is maybe the most important one, is change the behavior. Change the behavior of consumers and change the behavior of a single person. Because it all starts with the decision of one. It's the decision of yourself and individuals. Because do you need that product? Do you look for recycled content? Do you put it in the right bin? You know, put recyclables in the yellow lid bin, residual waste in the red lid bin, and the food and garden organics in the green lid bin. So we have to change that attitude and behavior, and we have to get rid of that convenience attitude that currently exists. I love this little doodle diagram. This is another representation of this linear economy. So you make something, you use it, and straight in the bin or in a landfill. The recycling economy is that you give it a couple of more lives and a couple of tries. Mostly it's downcycling because the quality does not improve unless you do chemical decomposition, and especially on plastics. You can actually improve the quality of the polymers. But in most occasions, you're actually downcycling. The circular economy is all about keeping these materials going and avoid them going into the bin or into the landfill. So really what we have to do is change our thinking. We have to go away from the waste management hierarchy to a circular economy hierarchy. And these are all the R's, and it's remanufacturing, refilling, reshaping, refusing, renewing, repairing, refurbishing, and all of that. And just on repairing, it's now legislated in America, can you believe it, and in Europe, the right to repair. So that means that if you put a product on the market and you take that model off the market, you have to guarantee the consumer 10 years access to parts, which is fantastic. Because when you buy a new washing machine now, most likely it will break down in the next 3 to 5 years. It costs you $300-400 to repair. Sometimes the parts are not available because it's imported. So what do? You go and buy a new one. And the old one sits in a garage. I've got one. I found a pump now, and I always use it as an example. On eBay, $56. I have to still put the pump in. And I had to buy a washing machine, then I'll have 2 washing machines. But it's interesting, so the whole mindset is changing a little bit. And this is from Hargroves, and so these are the waves. And the next wave we're seeing, so this was, we managed how to deal with iron and make steel stuff and harness steam. Then the third wave was electricity and chemicals and petrochemicals, electronics, and the fourth wave, the digital era, which we're in now. Now the sixth wave is all about sustainability, green chemistry, biochemistry, industrial ecology, and the circular economy. So we're very excited by the opportunities. So we have to get rid of this thinking as we're living in a machine. We actually have to become part of the environment because that's what it's all about. Living, we should think we're part of a living system. We don't sit on the top and we can just destroy it all. We're part of a living system. Now, yeah, it's disappointing. I'm being recorded here, so I can't really say what I think. But it is disappointing. But you see, there's a shift in thinking already. It's all about greenhouse gas emission reduction, decarbonisation, and coming up with plans. And I referred to that in an action plan before. We have to get an action plan together in Australia as well. But what are we going to do? Business as usual is not an option. Are we going to be less bad? What was proposed by Australia over there? Or we're going to lead the future and really come up with some great holistic foresight and ballsy and bold decisions and attitudes. The BAU, the linear system, is not achievable anymore, just burning fossil fuels, greenhouse gases, degrading natural systems, and just being wasteful. But if we just go to renewable energy, and not a lot of people actually know this, that if we go to 100% renewable energy, we will only reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 55%. So we have to do more. We can't just say that's the solution, solar panels and wind farms and electrical vehicles. That won't do it from green energy. We have to do more. So we have to do more in regenerative natural systems. We have to design out the waste. And we have to keep these materials on and on. And I like this bottom one, the ways of working. Now we're relying on industry to make everything cheap and accessible and convenient. And it's all very highly competitive. And I think that's why China is the biggest producer of goods in the world. And look what happened. We can't even control the supply chains anymore. shipping costs have gone up 800%. Goods will get more and more expensive going forward, if you can get anything, because parts are not available. In this less bad, we see more collaboration, but if we go to this full circular economy, it's all about collaboration. We have to make sure that we talk about solutions and removing the walls and actually making sure we sit together and look for joint solutions. Sorry, Wendy.
That's all right. You're in your element.
I'm on the roll here.
I know.
So what's happening in Western Australia is we've got a container deposit system. Hooray, it's back. I think we had it 25 years or 30 years ago. I wasn't around, but which is fantastic.
Longer than that.
Because we put
when I was a kid.
Yeah, and it was
a long time ago.
How much was it? 20 cents. Oh, you had pennies.
It was shillings, pence and shillings back then.
Yeah. But I like it because it puts a value. It's not a waste anymore. It puts a value on something, and actually the user has to pay for it up front. If you buy a carton of beer now, or a water bottle, for that matter, you actually pay a little bit more up front. If you bring the bottle back, you get your 10 cents back, which is fantastic. Government very aggressive in single-use plastic ban, because single-use, we shouldn't do single-use anything. So by the end of this year, plastic cutlery and utensils and thick bags and helium balloons will be banned. And by the end of next year, polystyrene packaging, cups and containers, microbeads and oxo-degradable plastics. So the state government is actually putting bans in place to accelerate this change of thinking. But what is really needed is capacity building. Everybody talks about circular economy. And at the grassroots, I think it's okay, but up there with the CEOs of local government and the director generals and politicians, they have no clue what circular economy really means. It's not recycling on steroids. It's really rethinking the systems approach we have now and changing that. So we organized a masterclass, and we had about 30 people there in June. We got some funding from state government, and it was fantastic. And there was really a good vibe in the room, and I wanted to do more. And just today, we launched our LinkedIn page and our Facebook page. So we established SIWA. And this is not a Christian education Western Australia. This is a circular economy Western Australia. And this is all about informing like-minded people, connecting like-minded people and catalyzing the change to a circular economy. So watch this space. Please get involved, register, or like us or follow us on LinkedIn. It's not for profit. And it's just a group of like-minded people that got together. So, but we need support, because the first thing we want to develop is a roadmap for circular economy in Western Australia, because there is no roadmap currently with the state government. And it's very rewarding, the circular economy transition. If you look at this is a study in Europe. If you look at the 4 biggest polluters: steel, plastic, aluminium, and cement production. By 2050, if we do nothing, the emissions of CO2 will be 530 million tons. If we do some material recirculation, being smart with that, we can reduce it by another 178. If we do product materials efficiency and implement circular business models, we can reduce the emissions from these 4 industries by 56%. And that's not killing the industry, that's just being smarter about how we deal with products, using the embedded industry energy. Last night we went to a function in Sylvia, you were there, on Collycrete. And Collycrete, they want to use the fly ash out of the coal, and then this is a dying out as well, coal-fired power stations, but they'll be around for a while. And then they've got 40 million tons of fly ash stored in these landfills next to it. Now, we will need, going forward, Portland cement to fixate hazardous waste in our landfill. But we can use fly ash for that, and we can actually use the Collycrete model to do that. So we're looking at that now. So it's fantastic how this development is happening, and looking at material efficiencies, and just, I can't use that, and we just put it in a hole in the ground and we'll forget about it. Wendy, you want to talk about us and the SDGs?
I'd love to talk about the SDGs. So why we're here is, I guess, initially Tamsin reached out to me. She'd seen our SDGs in our old environmental strategy when I brought along an old copy of it here today. So we were the first local government to embed SDGs in an environmental strategy, and what we've done now is we've moved from that environmental strategy now into a sustainability strategy, which we're just developing. But this is about using what's already in existence and not reinventing the wheel. So for those of you that don't know, Sustainable Development Goals have been around since 2016. They've been approved by obviously went through the United Nations. Our own government adopted them a couple of years after that. And it's a fantastic framework because it's global and it's there and it makes sense. So no matter what you're doing, whether it's climate, whether it's partnerships, whether it's life on the land, whether it's clean water, you'll find a reason for linking what you're doing to Sustainable Development Goals. So we're not reinventing the wheel. There's a framework there and we're going to use it. So it's working globally and there's no reason why we can't use it here. Obviously, there'll be some Sustainable Development Goals that don't resonate with everybody. Some countries are going to resonate more with, poverty and, those sorts of things. But there's going to be some standard things like climate change, particularly life on the land. They relate to everybody. Clean water relates to everybody. So what we did is we've embedded the Sustainable Development Goals in all of our work that we do. And in our new sustainability strategy, we have, on that circle there, we have 4 sections. And so in each of those areas, we look at what we can do internally, what we can do externally, and then how they link to the Sustainable Development Goals, and they'll form part of our framework going forward. So I encourage you, if you haven't done a lot of work on Sustainable Development Goals, to get involved. It's a fantastic framework. So whether you're going to be demonstrating circular economy leadership, whether it's responding to climate emergency, create value in the community and reduce our environmental impact, they're our 4 sections that we're really heavily focused on, and everything we do now in our organisation is going to be driven by our sustainability strategy. So they, and that will flow on to the Sustainable Development Goals. So really exciting times for us, and I'm actually on a sustainability advisory group for Main Roads, and I was so excited. I came back to the office after my first meeting and I said, you wouldn't believe it, they've actually linked all of their things, all of their targets to the SDGs. I was so excited to think governments actually also got on board and are doing this now. So, there's going to be more of this going forward, and it's a really exciting time. And as I said, it's already been developed and it's global, and so use them. What did we have next? Oh, that was it. That was it.
We were going to share all this.
Yeah, we were going to share this, but I'll just give you a little handy hint. Marcus loves presenting, so if he starts, good luck getting a word in edgeways. But I do want to go back just to one thing Marcus did say earlier on, and he was talking about changing your thinking and behaviour change. And we have a waste education team at the EMRC, a team of 6, and they are all about behaviour change. And they're out there in the community. We've got great groups that we work with, but we're also educating just the average household. So we do bin audits, and they go out and they look in people's bins. I know it sounds really gross, but they do it. And, depending on what's in that bin, you might get a smiley face on your bin, you might get a really sad face, and if it's really terrible, it'll be taped up and won't be collected. So, and we're going through that education process to then have those conversations with people to say, your bin wasn't collected and it was taped up because you need to understand that you're putting recyclables in your normal rubbish bin, or if you've got a 3-bin system, you're putting dirty nappies in a FOGO bin, or whatever it is. So trying to get people to understand that, you saw the targets before, we've got to get better at recycling. We've got to get better at making sure that what goes in the yellow lid bin can be recycled. Containers for Change is doing a great part of that, but there's a long way to go. And food and garden organics is the future, and that's where it's going to make a really big impact. So,
I'll just quickly talk about these pictures up there. We're saving power poles now from landfill. There's 800,000 power poles on the Swiss network, the Southwest Interconnected System, that's owned by Western Power. And a power pole has an average life of 40 years. So 20,000, theoretically, 20,000 poles would be decommissioned. And that's now accelerated because we're getting a lot of underground power now in the suburbs. Now, what used to happen here is these poles used to be cut, and if they are in the regions, they go into an unlined landfill. A lot of these poles are treated, CCA-treated poles, in an unlined landfill. So that's going to be an absolute disaster forever. So we said, well, let us set up a system. You commit all the poles to us. We will salvage the untreated poles, and we actually put it in that big shredder there, the timber shredder, we'll talk about that. We will strip the steel of it, which used to go to landfill. And the CCA-treated part, we'll actually put in our secure Class 4 hazardous waste landfill at Red Hill. Okay? So environmental good outcome, we're saving, recovering as much as we can. And it's all paid for by selling the steel. 25% of the weight of what we get in is these steel reinforcements that used to just go to landfill. And we sell it now for $350 a ton. And we turn over about $1 million a year now in this, and we can pay for operators and excavators. And they said, no, it's going to be too expensive, you know. And I must say, Western Power are a fantastic partner in this. But normally said, no, let's put it in landfill, it's the cheapest option. By recovering 25% of it, it actually pays for secure disposal of the CCA-treated poles and recovery, the untreated part of it. So it's fantastic. The other example is our timber processing line. So we take all the end-of-life untreated timbers, such as pallets, and we take in about 1,500 tons per month, which is 1.5 million kilograms of timber, about 18,000 tons per annum. Now we grind that through that big grinder on the left. Then it goes into, we pull out the nails with a magnet. Then there's an eddy current that pulls out the non-ferrous materials, copper and aluminium. And then it goes into a screen, and it makes two products. A 0 to 10 millimeter product, which we sell now to the chicken broiler and animal bedding industry. Yeah? So we're replacing a virgin product. And now the chickens are on there, and horses and all of that. And now we're actually looking at taking back the soiled material and composting that through our Vogel processing plant. So being truly circular. And the oversize is even more interesting, is that's the 10 to 40 millimeter wood chip. We are building a pyrolysis plant at our Hazelmere facility. And pyrolysis is just without oxygen heating up the chamber, and it goes up to 850 degrees, and we're going to create a syngas. And we're going to create so much syngas that we're going to generate 3 megawatt of power. And we put a dedicated power line from Hazelmere into Perth Airport, and we're going to power Perth Airport going forward. So this is 100% renewable energy, powering Perth Airport. And this is not the Qantas Club and the runway lights, but Perth Airport is all the industrial area around it. They consume about 25 megawatt, and we're going to feed them 10% of their consumption will actually come from renewable energy. And I think that's what it's all about. And then there's another product that comes out of the system. So gas comes out, syngas, and then biochar comes out. And biochar, that's the new wonder product of the future. A good example is we're doing a trial with a farmer in the southwest, and he feeds his cows every couple of days a handful of biochar. And a cow doesn't create methane from the back end like we do. It creates methane, it burps out methane. And cows burp out a lot of methane. I think 25% of the greenhouse gas is actually methane from cattle and cows and sheep and all of that. Now he feeds his cows biochar, and it reduces the emission of methane from the cow by 30%, just by feeding him biochar. And he also tells me that his cows are happier. And I don't know how you measure the happiness factor in a cow. Maybe they're in the stable and they're very chilled. But and this is stuff we really have to rethink. The other thing is that biochar is very stable, and so carbon sequestration, we can actually put it back in the soil. We can make activated carbon out of it for filters. We're going to produce 4,000 tons of this biochar. And we've got an expression of interest now out in the market. But that's rethinking. These pellets used to go into our landfill. And by coming up with innovation and some initial investment, we're actually delivering on a circular economy. So I thought I just would like to highlight that. Well, thanks for having us, and we're ready for questions, isn't it?
Yeah.
Anyone have any questions? Eric?
Thank you very much for your talk. It's very enthusiastic, and it makes me want to go home and do more recycling. But I've got a question about. I love the fact that you're going to start doing the pyrolysis to make syngas, but towards the future, the government is going more towards hydrogen. So are you going to push more towards, rather than making syngas, but more towards going towards making pure hydrogen and graphite, high-quality graphite?
Yeah. This is a hydrogen discussion is very topical. Obviously, everybody's hydrogen. But we're a decade away from really commercializing it. And we actually had a meeting last week, and we said we need a hydrogen truck, and we looked for funding, but you have to buy 10 trucks to get funding. To get subsidies from the state government, and then you have to have access to fuel. So that's and there's going to be one built in Kwinana, and we think maybe we should put a refueling station up at Red Hill for the trucks that come across the Nullarbor. So we're thinking about all of this. We're actually doing a trial now to look at our methane gas from the landfill, because we also generate 3 megawatt at our landfill. We power 4,500 houses, so we convert methane gas from landfill into electricity and pump it into the grid. We could do something with that renewable energy and then make green hydrogen. Definitely, but we're a local government. We're not that,
We're not that out there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but we would love to, hook up with industry and do something. And we're talking to Hyzon now to do something with trucks. And we're actually just outside, whilst we were waiting, we're talking about how do we get 10 trucks. And we're going to talk to our member councils. And actually see whether some need a tractor or a truck or a coach or just a Camry, and convert that, because I think they're eligible as well. So we want to be out there, but we think there's one step in between, maybe ethanol, make ethanol from methane gas, and use that first as an additive to petrol and diesel, but work towards hydrogen, because we want to be zero emission. This is interesting. We do a report every year, obviously, and our Scope 1 emissions are 132,000 CO2 equivalent tons. But our electricity use is 780 tons. So by just putting solar panels on, we might be 100% renewable, but we're still pumping out. We got compactors, they're 60-ton compactors. They've got exhausts like this, and they're pumping out So we have to come up with innovations in that space.
Now, well, don't get me wrong, there's not many people looking directly to use pyrolysis to make pure hydrogen at the moment. It's very new in development, but it's just something to look towards in the future.
Yeah, good. Cheers.
Yeah, I'd like to know, Japan usually 100% recycle. They achieve that quite easily. Do you know the difference between what they do, what we do, or why they're doing better, what they're doing worse?
The biggest difference is they have 6 or 8 bins at every household, so they do the separation at the source. And the other thing is in the definition of recovery. So waste to energy is very popular in Japan, and they see that as recovery. We deliberately didn't put it in the state-based strategy as being circularity, being circular, because it would be very easy to just go straight from landfilling and then burn everything, which is a waste. First we have to recover the materials because we have to achieve that circularity. The other things, some stuff we shouldn't burn. Food and garden organics we shouldn't burn because a lettuce is 99% water. And so you're robbing calorific value in your waste to energy facility from plastics to make steam out of the water that's in the food waste. So organic waste should be composted, and that's why so it's all in the definition, but they're doing a great job. And it's a cultural thing. It's that behavior change thing. Everybody accepts this. Would you accept now that you would have 8 bins in a household? I think there would be a bit of pushback, but that's where we're going to go to.
I know the residual, they have a special way of burning, and the plastics, they usually make garments out of it.
Yeah, that's right. So PET, yeah, that's right, PET shirts. That's right, but so you give it one extra life. But then your PET T-shirt, your sports shirt, after a couple of years is gone again. The big issue, it's all turned into fast fashion now. and it's worn for 2-3 months because it only costs $7 for a T-shirt, and then it's thrown away. So I think they're ahead of us. Now, this is actually interesting that you mentioned Japan. In Japan, the federal government says, Toyota and Lexus, when you build a new car, you shall use 15% of recycled content in everything. So if you build a bumper on a car or any plastic in a car, there's minimum of 15% recycled content. So that creates a market for plastics to be recycled. So a lot of our plastic HDPE bottles actually are flaked and pelletized, and they go to Japan and end up in bumpers and in cars. So this is that leadership that I think the federal government has to do to just demand recycled content.
And while we're talking about plastic, so we're going to be doing a trial with a company from Taiwan to look at pelletising plastics. And in my discussions with Main Roads, we've been talking about the fact that if we get this right, you know, how many white posts do you see all around Australia? And they're made out of plastic. Why can't they be made out of recycled plastic? How many screen walls? How many barriers? All those things could all be made out of recycled plastic. So it's about rethinking what they're doing and making sure that at the forefront of everything that we discuss, sustainability comes first. So,
on the topic of Japan, they on all of their refills, they come in the soft plastic rather than buying a new bottle of shampoo. Is there any reason why Australia isn't adopting a similar model like that, or is that beyond the scope that you're able to?
Oh, yeah, I mean, we're involved and we give advice all the time. And the issue, it's really led by the beverage industry. And they have got a covenant, the APCO, Australian Packaging Industry Covenant. And they've got very ambitious targets as well. By 2025, all packaging has to be recyclable, compostable, or reusable. So I think there is some push. And now suddenly, and I can't believe it, Coca-Cola announced a couple of weeks ago that they're going to make a plant-based plastic Coke bottle. So if it ends up in the environment, it's actually going to break down and doesn't sit there for 100 years, being a normal plastic. So it can be done, but it's all pressure from the consumer. That's where it will come from.
Fantastic. Yeah.
You photo stuff, I assume you just bring it compostable.
Yes. So this is good. We went to the market, a 100,000 ton facility. It always has to be aerobically composted in the end, but you can have a step before that and put the 040 mil in an anaerobic digester. So we're looking at that because then methane gas again, it's 100% controlled, so very efficient, and we can use our existing engines that pump electricity to the grid to turn it into electricity.
You get a digester with a solution for it.
What, wet, so effluent or like a... Oh, okay. There we go. We should talk.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because we're thinking of dry anaerobic digestion, so in tunnels. And that generates methane with about 52% methane, so or gas. And that's combustible, so that's good enough for us. The problem is if you have a real wet digester, a bit like your stomach, if you put the wrong stuff in, you upset the whole system, you have to purge it, and that's not pretty. Comes out at the back and the front. And then you have to reseed it again, and so that's why we're leaning towards dry digester, because we can get gas out of it that burns. But still, the digestate then has to be composted and turned into and aerobically composted. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But we should talk. Fantastic! I'm glad we came tonight.
Yes, please.
Several years ago, ACI used to have a glass recycling plant, and that's gone, but are we going to go back to that sort of thing? It says to transport heavy glass.
Yeah, I know because
it all goes on rail to South Australia. It makes no sense whatsoever, but I guess it's a supply and demand matter, and for a company to want to put their hand up to go back to that sort of manufacturing.
Yeah, but that's going to stop. There's about 60,000 tons of glass being collected, and that's now, a lot of it is going into roads, and that concrete actually needs silica, so they can use the glass and grind it. But that's downcycling, to turn it from a glass bottle into road base. But at least it's not going into landfill. And I think that's the dilemma we have, because glass into a landfill, it's inert, there's no gas coming out of it. But to truck it all the way to When you look at 4XB, that comes from Queensland, it goes to Perth, it goes to Karratha, then there's a container deposit refund point there, it comes back to Perth, then it goes on the train to Adelaide. It's nuts.
I think Gage Road here, it's just very sustainable.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, no more 4X. No, but you're right, and I think that's the balance we have to look at, because there has to be an economic driver as well. It's not at all cost, and glass is inert. But a lot of glass bottles are actually imported from Thailand into Western Australia. So it's cheaper to get bottles from Thailand to manufacture them here.
There's a lot of industrial waste out there too, which should be recycled.
Yeah.
Soil improvement, sort of the red mud out there.
Yeah.
We use soil improvement, especially
Yeah.
the sandy soils.
Yeah.
Which is not doing it.
Just expensive.
Yeah.
Couldn't even give it away, remember?
Yeah.
Yeah, because the farmers had to pay for the transport.
Yeah, and I just on Fogo on markets. Just can I have 2 more minutes?
Yeah, sure.
So what we did is, and we were a little bit sneaky in this. We're looking at markets because it all comes back to you can make a product out of recycle something and make a product out of it. But if there's no market for it, it doesn't make sense. So with our Fogo collection, we built an interim facility ahead of the permanent facility, and we're taking 15,000 tons. So all the residents of Bayswater and Bassendean have a 3-bin system, and it comes to us, and we compost that. And we are doing a trial now with Bunnings and Mitre10 and IGA, and we're actually bagging our Fogo-derived compost. We mix it with other manures, or we've got a contractor that does that for us, and it's now in the shelves already for 2 months. You can't see it's Fogo-derived because the end user shouldn't care what it is. If it meets the Australian standard, who cares what it is? It's rotting material anyway, compost. So we bagged 120,000 bags, and they're in the shelves now, and the consumers are buying it, and we're not getting any negative feedback. We're also giving it back to the community now because we want to tell the story. If you keep your material clean in the Fogo bin, then we will pick it up and we'll process it and we'll test it and bag it, and then it comes back and you can use it again in your garden. Just to talk about that circularity of what we're trying to achieve. So
look for the Brunnings
brand.
Yes, Brunnings. Brunnings garden compost.
Garden compost. Yeah. So it's good. It's a success story.
On that note, thank you very much. Please join me in thanking our
Thank you.
token of our appreciation, a little gift.
Oh, fantastic. Geez, look at this.
We always give away some engraved RACI glasses, so you'll have something to remember us by after tonight. So, yes, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. That concludes tonight's AGM and camaraderie. Please look out on the website for our next events that are coming up. But thank you very much, and we'll see you at the next one.
And please reach out to the SEWA website and follow us or join us.
Yeah, make sure that's cwar.com.au, not cwar.edu.au.
That's right.
Yes.
Please do use WA.
Absolutely, we will.
Yeah, we will.
Thanks guys.
Cheers. Thank you very much.